Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This'll be the continuation of Sometimes All It Takes to See Is to Look. This'll be Part 3, Chapter 3, entitled, I've Never Wanted to Dropkick Someone So Much. Shouta arrives at Aldera Middle School at 2:57 p.m. The building is plain, unsuspecting of what's about to happen, given Shota's theory is correct. Not everyone knows this, but UA has taken down their fair share of corrupt schools that had the misfortune of catching Nezu's beady gaze. Anything from discrimination to money laundering is fair game if Nezu deems it so. He does have to sate his sadistic side somehow. Flipping a small recording device under his shirt, Shouta walks inside and is greeted by a bored-looking woman sitting at the front desk. "Can I help you?" she asked flatly, glancing up at Shouta. "Yes, I'm here from UA to meet with the principal." And if that woman didn't suddenly sit up straighter at the mention of UA. "Yes, of course. Go right in. He's been expecting you." He nods and thanks before walking past the desk to the office she pointed towards. Opening the door and sliding inside, he is met with a man that can only be described as weaselly. He is short and bulky, but not in a muscular way, with brown hair greased into a messy quiff that doesn't really match with his round head, or his dark, beady eyes and petulant mouth. A plaque on his desk reads proudly, Asano Orochi, Principal. The man stands quickly when Shouta walks in, reaching a pudgy hand across the desk for him to shake. It's slightly moist with perspiration. "It's a pleasure to have you here." Asano trails off, tilting his head slightly in question. Aizawa Shouta. "Aizawa-san, a teacher from such a prestigious high school." Asano finished rather haughtily, clapping his hands together like he did something to be proud of. Taking a seat once again and gesturing for Shouta to do the same, he curls his lips into a smug grin. Shota's just focused on trying to resist the urge to wipe his hand off on his pants. "Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice," Shouta responds, tone clipped and professional. "I'm here to discuss two of my students who previously went here. Some concerning things have come up, and I'm hoping you can shed some light on the situation." Asano smiled wider, showing off his slightly yellowing teeth. Of course. You must be talking about Bakugo Katsuki and Midoriya Izuku." Shouta nods briefly, leaving the conversation open on his end. He often used this tactic in interrogations. If he doesn't say what he wants or what his opinions are, the other person will often fill the silence with what they think, truthfully instead. Especially if they are weak-willed and can't handle the silence, which is exactly what happens with Asano. After a minute of awkward silence, purely on Asano's end, he gives in. "Well," he stutters out, looking a bit uncomfortable. "Good. Bakugo was always a great student, really bright and helpful in class, and with that strong quirk of his, we always knew he would be amazing at heroics. It's no wonder he got into such a fine school as UA." Shouta gave away nothing. "Yes, he does get good grades." Asano looked more relaxed now, happy to have Shota's agreement over something. He nodded vigorously. "We were very lucky that he got into UA. It really helps our school's reputation and for us to get more funding, since such an excellent student attended here for middle school." Shota's eye twitched almost imperceptibly. "And what of Midoriya?" Shouta asked, tone cautiously level. Asano's face immediately darkened almost comically. "Well, yes, he went to this school as well, though most of us here were very surprised he got into UA. Always a little troublemaker, you must know, Aizawa-san." Shouta cocked an eyebrow up at that, still not giving away his emotions, although he was fuming on the inside. Asano must have taken that to mean some semblance of agreement because he continued with fervor. The principal leaned forward a bit, like he was sharing a controversial secret. With him being quirkless and all, we tried to make sure he couldn't get into UA, but it looks like he weaseled his way in anyways. Always the tricky one, the brat." Shouta clenched his jaw tightly, not wanting to say something and miss getting more information about Midoriya's obvious maltreatment. "Is that so?" Shouta forces out. Asano didn't seem to notice the slight change in tone, just leaning back in his chair, nodding again smugly, perfectly at ease. "We were sure he somehow tricked everyone into thinking that he had a quirk, but then the sports festival aired." Asano pursed his lips in question. "It truly is a wonder how someone as useless as Midoriya got such a powerful quirk." At this, Shouta stood abruptly, slamming both his hands on the desk in front of him, quirk activated pointlessly out of the rage he felt bubbling inside of him. "Midoriya is not useless," Shota's eyes narrowed harshly at the now slightly quivering man before him. My student is passionate, caring, incredibly determined, and so strong, in more ways than one. He has immense heroic potential, and I will not have you so blatantly slander his character. Shouta turned his quirk off and took his hands back, but he did not sit down again. From what you have openly said, I can already accuse you of quirk discrimination and mistreatment of a student, not including what I find on security footage from the years my students were here, that you will give me freely. I will not hesitate to get Nezu, the principal of UA, involved if you do not comply, understand? Shouta felt his quirk flare up again briefly at the end of his statement, before fixing a steely gaze on the now scared-looking principal. Shouta fished a business card out of his pocket, slammed it on the desk, making Asano jump. Email every file you have in the past 3 years to me by the end of the day, he growled, before slamming out of the room before he could reply. He stormed past the front desk and out the building, roughly turning off the recording device and sliding into his car. Shota's hands and forehead coming to rest on the steering wheel. No wonder Midoriya acted so nervous around his teachers. If all of them acted anything like Asano did, hell, Shouta would be nervous around his teachers too. This was worse than he thought. That man does not deserve to be called a principal. He literally admitted to discrimination, like he wouldn't get in trouble for it. If that tells Shouta anything about this society, it's that it really is messed up. Shota's phone pinging interrupted his thoughts. It was an email from Asano with a bunch of video files attached. That was fast, though he supposes the threatening helped. Shouta lays his head back down on the steering wheel. He is not sure he wants to watch them. He knows he should, in order to make a case against the middle school and to help Midoriya, but he also knows that they probably contain 3 years' worth of his problem child suffering, at the hands of his peers and teachers, the people who are supposed to protect him. Shouta forwards the email to Nezu, planning to play him a recording of his earlier conversation when he inevitably has a meeting about this. Nezu was going to have a field day with so much to work with. Shouta eventually found himself back at his apartment, sitting in front of his laptop with the first surveillance video queued up. Nezu had taken the liberty of sorting through all the footage for just what contains his 2 students before sending it all back to him to watch and take note of. His quirk probably aiding in the speed of that task. Nezu didn't say anything about the content, just a cryptic, "Try not to kill any minors" message at the top of the email. If Nezu thinks he will want to kill anyone after watching, though, he's sure it's bad. He starts watching from the earliest video, the timestamp from roughly 3 years ago, when his students were in their first year of middle school. He has a pencil in hand, ready to mark down anything incriminating. There's no sound to the recordings, but he can clearly see what's going on. A group of students surrounds Midoriya's desk during class, soundless insults spilling from their lips. Midoriya hangs his head down as they laugh and walk away. The teacher barks something out to Midoriya, to which he nods and gathers his stuff, heading towards the principal's office. Midoriya walks into the school, a stack of notebooks held in his arms. A leg shoots out from nowhere, tripping him, causing him to drop everything he was holding. Everyone laughs as Midoriya wordlessly begins gathering his things. A teacher walks by, not even sparing a glance. A group of students corner Midoriya in a hallway. Bakugo is there. He says something and laughs, shoving Midoriya hard into the wall of lockers before the group walks away, toxic smirks on their faces. Right outside the front of the school, Bakugo holds Midoriya's uniform collar, shouting something in his face. Midoriya responds, and Bakugo releases his hold before punching him hard in the stomach, anger twisting his features. Midoriya grips his sides, bending over slightly. Bakugo says something else, a smirk on his face, then pushes Midoriya roughly to the ground, walking away laughing. Midoriya walks into his classroom, his classmates laughing behind their hands. A lone red spider lily is resting delicately on his desk. Midoriya looks down, blinking rapidly, before trotting to his desk, plucking the flower off and shoving it into his backpack. Even the teacher is holding back a laugh. It goes on like this, video after video of the mental and physical bullying and abuse that Midoriya went through for years. The relentless teasing, the beatings, the suicide baiting. The students always laughed. The teachers never once stepped in or got anyone in trouble besides Midoriya, who never started anything. Shouta was shocked. Yes, he assumed there would be bullying, but never once did he imagine it was this bad. And the blatant victim blaming. He can no longer be surprised by his students' reaction to things now. And Bakugo. Shouta grit his teeth, pulling up the final 2 clips in the email. There will be words, at the very least. The video began and Shota's pencil, once held in a white-knuckled grip, snapped in half. The teacher announces something to the class, grinning pointedly in Midoriya's direction, to which he shrunk in his seat. Suddenly, Bakugo explodes Midoriya's desk, causing him to fall. Bakugo yells something to a slightly shaking Midoriya on the floor, before returning to his seat. Only then did the teacher, who was watching the entire time, say something. The classroom is empty, save Midoriya, seated at his desk with Bakugo and 2 others crowding around him. Bakugo says something, swiping a notebook off of Midoriya's desk. He tries to grab it back, to which Bakugo promptly explodes it between his hands and tosses it out the open window. Bakugo puts a smoking hand on Midoriya's shoulder, saying something, then walks out of the room, pausing for just a moment to say something else. Midoriya whips around, anger in his eyes, before Bakugo sets off a few explosions in his hand, causing Midoriya to look back at the ground. It is illegal to use a quirk in public, especially on someone else, and the teacher not reporting or even reprimanding it? Also very illegal. Shota's jaw is tight. Bakugo was Midoriya's main bully. That much was incredibly clear. No wonder Midoriya still flinches when Bakugo yells or explodes something in the classroom. Shouta wouldn't be surprised if he had some form of PTSD or other mental illness from all of that, considering it went on for at least 3 years. Shouta leans his head back in his chair, putting his hands over his eyes. He should have done this sooner. He should have addressed Midoriya's issues at the beginning of the school year, and honestly, Bakugo should not have gotten into UA. The school has a strict no-bullying policy, but Aldera tried to cover up everything that happened. Shota's mad that it worked. He has never wanted to punt a kid into the sun more than he does now, though he supposes that's what Nezu meant in his message. Shouta runs his hands down his face. He can't hurt Bakugo no matter how much he wants to. There will be consequences, maybe even expulsion, but he knows Midoriya wouldn't want that, with how forgiving he is. The problem child has probably already forgiven Bakugo, if how he still calls him Kachan is any indication. Speaking of, why does Midoriya insist on calling him what is obviously a childhood nickname? They're not really friends anymore, so it doesn't make sense. It seems like Midoriya was ignoring the fact that he was abused. Yes, this is abuse. By him for so long. Shouta knows that, oftentimes, long-term abuse victims will rationalize their suffering, to the point that they believe it's not that bad or normal to be hurt in such a way. Just as bad, they will believe what their abuser says to them in terms of mental abuse. The videos had no sound, but he could plainly see at least suicide baiting. The way he's surprised when someone compliments him. And more worrying than that response from his obviously low self-esteem, there's the blatant amount of reckless, self-sacrificing behavior Midoriya has shown, regardless of his personal injuries. He didn't even hesitate to break his bones for someone else, his bones, and his unnaturally high pain tolerance, he barely even blinked. Shouta drops his face into his hands. This kid. He probably thinks his life is worth nothing, if he can use it to save someone else. And Shouta didn't notice. Instead, he severely misjudged a toxic relationship. He saw it as a petty rivalry when really it's a bully-victim relationship, and pitted them against each other to try and help them get over their differences. Shouta had intentionally paired Midoriya with his longtime bully. That can't have been good for his mental health. It really is no wonder his student didn't trust him. Shouta scheduled a weekend meeting with Nezu. It was pretty unusual for teachers to do something like this, but Shouta felt like this issue was important enough that it needed to be discussed presently, and not wait until Monday. So that's how he finds himself in Nezu's office on a Saturday morning. "Ah, Aizawa-kun." Nezu poured out 2 cups of tea, offering one to Shouta from where he sat at his desk. He accepts it gratefully, before Nezu folds his paws under his chin, elbows resting on the desk in front of him. "I assume this is about the videos?" Shouta nodded. "And I assume you watched them as well." Nezu's cheerful smile tightened into something slightly unnatural. "Yes, it would seem we have done one of our students wrong." Nezu sipped his tea. "I presume you want to punish Bakugo?" Shouta grimaced. "You know as well as I do that UA has a zero tolerance to bullying. He probably should not have gone into the school at all." "This is quite the unfortunate thing to miss, yes." Shouta sighed. "That said, he doesn't have zero potential. He's definitely slightly calmer than he was the first day of class. And if we were to expel him now, I'm sure Midoriya would blame himself. Although he shouldn't. Their relationship is unhealthy for both of them. Quite likely, I'm afraid. It seems your student has a soft spot for his bully, It's concerning that he does, but it's obvious that he still considers him as something. The nickname says as much. What do you propose we do about that, then? Shouta crosses his arms and leans back in his chair. I think I need to speak with Midoriya first. I need to gauge his mental state before we take any action, though. I don't want to do something that'll end up hurting him more. Nezu hummed. And Bakugo? I'll talk with him as well. Separately, obviously. Shouta sighed. While what he did was in no way okay, it was obvious his teachers weren't doing him any favors either. They didn't reprimand him at all, from what I've seen. Yes. That is bound to be cause for some of his more violent tendencies. Shouta sighed again. I'm going to have to get in contact with their parents to discuss how to handle all of this. Shouta waved his hand in a nondescript manner. I'm thinking at least anger management therapy for Bakugo, probably more, and I have little doubt that Midoriya needs therapy as well. Those are all excellent ideas, yes. When will all of this take place? I'll meet with my students on Monday. Depending on how that goes, I'll probably contact their parents to meet the next day. Nezu gave an almost feral grin. I think it would be best if I attended the parent meetings as well, don't you think? Nezu has a tiny gleam in his eye. He has no love for abusers, in fact. He often shows his more sadistic side when it comes to them. Mix that with the surprisingly genuine care he has for children. Shouta felt a shiver run up his spine. Of course. Nezu relaxed his smile a bit. Of course. Now, there's also the matter of Aldera Middle School, was it? Shouta wordlessly pulls his recording device out of his pocket, placing it on the desk in front of him. Nezu plucked it off the table, swiftly plugging it into his computer and starting the audio. Shouta watched as Nezu's fur bristled at every cruel sentence that Asano said. By the end of that frustrating conversation, he had poofed out about an inch. He gently reached his paws up to smooth his fur, then turned to look at Shouta, the dark gleam once again glistening in his eyes. It seems we have another school to raise. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 3 of Sometimes All It Takes to See Is to Look. Chapter 4 will be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying, and as always, thank you so much for listening.